Commander Zethkar pressed his scaled palm against the cold metal of the observation deck window, watching the stars blur past as his ship limped through hyperspace. His 3 hearts beat in an irregular rhythm that matched the failing engines below. The wound across his chest still leaked blue blood despite the emergency medical patches, and his once proud uniform hung in tatters. Behind him, the remnants of the Galactic Defense Coalition's 7th Fleet filled the vast hangar bay. What had once been a mighty armada of 12,000 vessels was now reduced to barely 300 battered ships, carrying survivors from across the galaxy. Cathari warriors sat next to Vorthan scientists, while crystalline beings shared ration packs with gaseous ethereals contained in mobile atmosphere suits. All of them bore the same expression of defeat that Zethkar felt crushing his spirit. The Void Swarm had come from beyond the galactic rim 6 months ago. Nobody knew where they originated from, only that they consumed everything in their path. Planets, stars, even black holes. Nothing could satisfy their endless hunger. Each victory against them only revealed more ships, more creatures, more devastation spreading like a cancer across the galaxy. "Commander," came a soft voice behind him. Zethkar turned to see Lieutenant Vex High, his communications officer. The young Cathari's tail twitched nervously, and her usually bright golden eyes were dimmed with exhaustion. "We're receiving a transmission from the Coalition High Command. They want to speak with you immediately." Zethkar nodded slowly and followed her to the bridge. The command center of his flagship, the Stellar Pride, had once been a testament to Cathari engineering prowess. Now sparks flew from damaged consoles, and half the displays showed only static. The crew moved with mechanical precision, their movements lacking the energy that had once made them the most feared naval force in the galaxy. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Admiral Thexmore, the Coalition's supreme commander. The old Vorthan's usually pristine blue skin was marked with stress lines, and his forearms moved restlessly as he spoke. "Commander Zethkar," the Admiral began, his voice heavy with fatigue, "I know your fleet has suffered tremendous losses, but we have one final mission that may determine the fate of our galaxy." Zethkar straightened despite his wounds. "What are your orders, Admiral? We've discovered a small system at the edge of Coalition space that the swarm is approaching. Intelligence suggests they have significant defensive capabilities that might slow the advance. We need you to make contact and coordinate a joint defense." The commander studied the star chart that appeared on his screen. The system looked unremarkable. A single yellow star with several planets, located far from any major trade routes or strategic positions. "Well, what makes this system so special, sir?" Admiral Thexmore's expression grew puzzled. "The inhabitants call themselves humans, and they've managed something we thought impossible. 3 days ago, a swarm advance force of 50,000 ships attacked their system. The humans not only repelled the attack, but completely destroyed the entire force with minimal losses to themselves." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the bridge crew. Zethkar felt his own skepticism rising. "Admiral, with respect, that seems impossible. Even our best estimates suggest the swarm ships are individually superior to most Coalition vessels." "That's what we thought too," the Admiral replied grimly. "But the sensor data doesn't lie. Furthermore, the humans have sent us a message." He paused, and something like wonder crept into his voice. "They're offering to help us fight the swarm, not just defend their own system. They want to take the battle to the enemy." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of damaged electronics. Zethkar tried to process this information. In 6 months of constant retreat, no species had successfully defended against the swarm, let alone offered to go on the offensive. "What do we know about these humans?" he asked. "Very little," Admiral Thexmore admitted. "They only achieved interstellar flight about 200 of their years ago. Their technology appears to be significantly behind ours in most areas." "But, Commander, they've done something we haven't managed in 6 months of fighting." The Admiral leaned forward, and Zethkar could see desperation in his ancient eyes. "You are to proceed to their system immediately. Learn everything you can about their defensive capabilities. If there's any chance they can help us turn the tide, we must take it." "Understood, sir." "What about the human communication?" "I'm transmitting it now. Commander, I've served in the Coalition Navy for 3 centuries, and I've never seen anything like what these humans accomplished." "Study that message carefully." The transmission ended, and a new file appeared on Zethkar's personal console. He opened it with trembling claws, unsure what to expect from this mysterious species that claimed they could fight the unstoppable swarm. The message began with technical specifications that made little sense. Humans apparently measured distance in units called kilometers, and time in periods called hours. But as he read further, the content became more intriguing. "To the Galactic Defense Coalition, The message began in surprisingly clear galactic standard. We have monitored your communications regarding the entity you call the Void Swarm. We understand you have suffered significant losses in your conflict with this enemy. We wish to extend our assistance in the coming battle. Zethkar paused, rereading the line. These humans weren't just offering to defend themselves. They were volunteering to help strangers fight a war that wasn't originally theirs. The message continued. Our analysis indicates that the swarm will reach the galactic core within approximately 90 standard days unless their advance is halted. We propose a coordinated strike against their primary fleet elements while they are reorganizing after their recent defeats. Recent defeats? Zethkar's mind raced. As far as the Coalition knew, the swarm had never been defeated in battle. Every engagement had been a strategic withdrawal at best, usually a catastrophic loss. We have prepared detailed tactical assessments based on our recent engagement with swarm forces. While our technology differs from yours, we believe our combined forces can achieve victory where individual efforts have failed. Time is critical. We await your response. The message was signed by someone called Admiral Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Command. Zethkar stared at the screen for a long moment before calling his senior staff to the bridge. Within minutes, the command center filled with his remaining officers, survivors from dozens of different species, all bearing the scars of their running battle with the swarm. We have new orders, he announced, then briefed them on their mission to the human system. When he finished, the bridge erupted in discussion. Commander, said Chief Science Officer Mordak, a crystalline being whose internal light flickered rapidly with excitement. If these humans have truly defeated a swarm force of that magnitude, their defensive strategies could revolutionize our entire approach to this war. Our intelligence reports indicate their technology is primitive compared to ours. No offense intended, she added quickly as if the humans might somehow hear her. Chief Engineer Colvin, a stocky Thane whose mechanical implants sparked occasionally, drummed his metal fingers against the console. Perhaps they've discovered some weakness in the swarm that we've missed, or maybe they have allies we don't know about. Zethkar considered their theories as he studied the star chart again. The human system was 12 hours away at their current speed. Not long to wait for answers, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure, he ordered, and send a response to the humans. Tell them we're en route and would welcome any tactical information they can share. As his crew scattered to their duties, Zethkar remained on the bridge, staring at the message from Admiral Chen. Something about the tone struck him as unusual. Where most Coalition communications were formal and diplomatic, this human message had a directness that was almost casual. Yet beneath the simple language he sensed something else, a quiet confidence that seemed impossible given the circumstances. The hyperspace jump to the human system took exactly 11 hours and 43 minutes. As the fleet dropped back into normal space, Zethkar found himself holding his breath despite having 3 different respiratory systems. What he saw defied all expectations. The human system was indeed under siege. Massive swarm bioships, each 1 kilometer long and bristling with organic weapons, filled the outer regions of the solar system. But something was wrong with the picture. The swarm ships weren't advancing in their usual overwhelming wave formation. Instead, they hung in space in ragged clusters, many showing signs of significant damage. "Commander," called Sensor Officer Jayla, her tentacles dancing over her console in excitement. "I'm reading approximately 200,000 swarm vessels in this system, but their formation is completely disorganized. Many appear to be in various states of repair." Zethkar moved to the tactical display, his 3 hearts beginning to beat faster. 200,000 ships was more than twice the force that had overwhelmed the Coalition's best-defended systems. Yet here they were, apparently stalled. What about human forces? I'm detecting multiple fleet groups throughout the inner system, Zayla reported, her voice filled with confusion. "But, Commander, the human ships are small." The main screen shifted to show the inner system, and Zethkar felt his jaw drop. Scattered between the planets were formations of human vessels that looked almost toy-like compared to both Coalition and swarm ships. The largest appeared to be no bigger than a Coalition frigate, while most were even smaller. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. "Approximately 50,000 human vessels, sir, but they're distributed in a complex defensive grid that spans the entire inner system. I've never seen anything like this formation." Before Zethkar could respond, his communications console chimed. Lieutenant Vex High looked up with surprise. "Sir, we're receiving a direct transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting permission to come aboard." "They want to send a delegation?" "No, sir," Vex High said slowly, checking her readings again. They're asking if they can escort our fleet safely through the outer system. Apparently there are navigational hazards. Zethkar looked back at the tactical display, noting the way swarm ships seemed to avoid certain areas of space. What kind of hazards? His question was answered by the arrival of the human escort fleet. 6 small ships, each no larger than a coalition shuttle, approached his formation with a precision that spoke of absolute confidence. As they drew closer, Zethkar could see that the human vessels were unlike anything in the coalition database. They were angular and aggressive-looking, covered in weapon systems that seemed almost primitive compared to energy-based coalition armaments. "Coalition Fleet," came a clear voice over the communication system. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Ship Indomitable. Welcome to the Sol System. We're here to guide you safely to our command station. Please maintain current formation and follow our lead." The voice was crisp and professional, but Zethkar detected an underlying tone that he couldn't quite identify. It wasn't fear or uncertainty. It was something else entirely. "Captain Rodriguez," Zethkar responded, "this is Commander Zethkar of the Coalition Fleet Stellar Pride. We appreciate the escort. Can you explain the nature of these navigational hazards?" There was a pause before the human captain responded, and when he did, Zethkar heard what sounded suspiciously like amusement in his voice. "Well, Commander, about 6 hours ago we finished installing our outer perimeter defenses. The swarm ships you see out there are having some difficulty adjusting to the new tactical environment. We thought it best to make sure your ships don't accidentally trigger any of our security measures." As if to emphasize the point, a massive explosion bloomed in the distance as one of the damaged swarm ships apparently ventured too close to something. The explosion was followed by 2 more in rapid succession. Zethkar watched in amazement as the human escort ships guided his fleet through what appeared to be an invisible maze. Occasionally, Captain Rodriguez would warn them to adjust course slightly, and moments later Zethkar would see another swarm ship stumble into whatever trap they'd avoided. "Captain," Zethkar said carefully, "exactly what kind of defenses are we navigating through?" "Oh, nothing too sophisticated, Commander," came the reply, and Zethkar was now certain he heard laughter in the human's voice. "Just some creative applications of basic physics? We humans have a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." Zethkar had no idea what a dog was, but as he watched another swarm ship disappear in a brilliant flash, he began to suspect that he was about to learn something very important about the nature of courage. The human command station defied every principle of military architecture that Zethkar had learned in his 2 centuries of service. Instead of the massive, heavily armored structures favored by coalition forces, the human facility appeared to be a collection of smaller modules connected by delicate-looking bridges. It orbited the 4th planet from their star, a red world they called Mars, and seemed almost fragile compared to the deadly dance of ships surrounding it. As his shuttle approached the docking bay, Zethkar studied the station's design through the viewports. What had initially appeared fragile revealed itself to be something far more sophisticated. The modules could apparently separate and recombine as needed, creating a structure that could adapt to changing tactical requirements. It was unlike anything in coalition military doctrine. "Impressive, isn't it?" asked Captain Rodriguez, who had insisted on personally piloting Zethkar to the station. The human was smaller than most coalition species, with dark skin and short black hair that seemed practical rather than decorative. Like all humans Zethkar had observed so far, he appeared young by coalition standards, but carried himself with the confidence of a veteran warrior. "It's certainly unique," Zethkar replied diplomatically. "How long did it take to construct this particular configuration?" "About 6 hours, Rodriguez said casually, as if rebuilding a command station was a routine morning task. "Though we've been working on the modular design for the past 3 years. Admiral Chen will explain more when you meet her." 6 hours. Zethkar tried to process this information as they docked. Coalition stations took months or even years to build, requiring massive industrial infrastructure and countless engineering teams. The idea that an entire command facility could be assembled in less than a day suggested capabilities far beyond what the intelligence reports had indicated. The docking bay hummed with activity that reminded Zethkar of his own fleet during better days. Human technicians moved with purposeful efficiency, maintaining and rearming the small but deadly ships that comprised their fleet. What struck him most was the complete absence of fear or desperation that had marked every coalition facility for months. These humans moved like people who expected to win. Admiral Sarah Chen was waiting for them in the station's central command center, and Zethkar's first impression was that human leaders were remarkably understated. Where coalition admirals typically wore elaborate uniforms denoting rank and species allegiance, Chen wore simple gray clothing with minimal decorations. She was taller than Captain Rodriguez, but still smaller than most Coalition officers, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Commander Zethkar," she said, extending her hand in what Zethkar had learned was a human greeting gesture. "Welcome to Sol. I'm sorry, we couldn't offer you a more peaceful introduction to our system." Zethkar carefully took her hand, noting the firm grip and calloused palm that spoke of hands-on experience. "Admiral Chen, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Your message to Coalition Command was quite remarkable." Chen led him to a central holographic display that showed the entire solar system in real time. The tactical situation was far more complex than it had appeared from outside the system. Swarm forces weren't simply stalled. They were trapped in an elaborate web of defensive zones that seemed to channel their movements while simultaneously picking them apart. "Before we discuss strategy," Chen said, "I think it's important that you understand what you're seeing here. This isn't just a defensive action, it's a comprehensive demonstration of human military doctrine applied to an asymmetric threat." The display zoomed in on one of the outer system battlefields, where a cluster of swarm ships was attempting to advance toward the inner planets. As Zethkar watched, invisible human defenses activated in sequence. Swarm ships that had been moving in formation suddenly found themselves scattered as their bioship's navigation systems failed. While they struggled to reorganize, small human ships emerged from concealment and struck with devastating precision before vanishing again. "How are you disrupting their formations?" Zethkar asked, fascinated despite himself. "Psychological warfare," replied a new voice. Zethkar turned to see a human female approaching the display. She was introduced as Dr. Elizabeth Harper, apparently their specialist in what humans called xenobiology. "The swarm ships are partially organic," Dr. Harper explained, manipulating the display to show detailed scans of swarm bioships. "Their navigation and coordination systems rely on biological neural networks that can be influenced through targeted electromagnetic fields. We've essentially given their ships the equivalent of severe headaches." Zethkar studied the data streams flowing across the display, but our scientists examined captured swarm technology for months without discovering this weakness. "That's because you were thinking like engineers," Admiral Chen said with a slight smile. "We approached it like doctors treating a patient. When Dr. Harper's team realized the ships were partially alive, they started looking for ways to make them sick rather than ways to destroy their technology." The elegance of the approach stunned Zethkar. Coalition forces had focused entirely on overpowering swarm defenses through superior firepower. The humans had instead found a way to turn the swarm's greatest advantage, their organic technology, into a crippling vulnerability. "That explains the disorganization," Zethkar said slowly, "but not how your fleet is able to engage forces that outnumber you so dramatically." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward and manipulated the display to show the inter-system defenses. "That's where human military history comes in handy. You see, Commander, humans have been fighting asymmetric warfare for our entire recorded history. We've learned a few things about how to make superior numbers work against an enemy instead of for them." The display showed what appeared to be empty space between the planets, but Rodriguez began highlighting hidden installations and weapon platforms. As each defensive position revealed itself, Zethkar began to understand the scope of what the humans had accomplished. "Every asteroid, every piece of space debris, every natural formation in our system has been turned into either a weapon platform or a sensor station," Rodriguez explained. "The swarm sees 50,000 ships, but they're actually facing approximately 10 million individual defensive positions." 10 million? Zethkar's voice cracked with disbelief. "Automated systems mostly," Admiral Chen clarified. "But the principle is sound. Instead of concentrating our forces in traditional formations that the swarm could overwhelm, we distributed them throughout the entire system. Every time they advance, they're attacked from directions they can't predict or defend against." Dr. Harper called up another display showing human ship designs. "We also had to completely rethink our approach to ship construction. Coalition vessels are built for extended campaigns and multiple role flexibility. Our ships are designed for a single purpose, to deliver maximum damage in minimum time, then escape before retaliation is possible." Zethkar studied the human ship specifications with growing amazement. Where Coalition vessels were heavily armored and built to survive prolonged engagements, human ships sacrificed almost all defensive systems in favor of speed, stealth, and devastating offensive capability. "Your ships have no defensive shields," he observed. "Don't need them," Captain Rodriguez replied cheerfully. "Our doctrine is built around the principle that the best defense is not getting hit in the first place. Every human ship is designed to strike fast and fade away. We call it hit-and-run tactics." But what happens when you can't run? Zethkar asked. Surely some situations require defensive stands. The command center fell silent for a moment, and Zethkar sensed he had touched on something significant. Admiral Chen exchanged a glance with her officers before answering. That's where human nature becomes a military asset, she said quietly. Commander, how many coalition species surrender when faced with impossible odds? Zethkar considered the question. Most species have protocols for strategic withdrawal or negotiated surrender when defeat becomes inevitable. It's considered the rational response to preserve personnel and resources. Humans don't surrender, Dr. Harper said simply. It's not that we can't, it's that we won't. When retreat isn't possible and victory seems impossible, humans become exponentially more dangerous. Admiral Chen manipulated the display to show recordings from the initial swarm attack 3 days earlier. When the swarm first arrived, they destroyed our outer defensive platforms and cornered approximately 5,000 of our ships near Jupiter. By your military standards, those ships should have surrendered or attempted to retreat. The recording showed human ships surrounded by overwhelming swarm forces, trapped with no apparent means of escape. Zethkar expected to see the familiar pattern of surrender negotiations that marked most coalition defeats. Instead, he watched something that defied his understanding of rational military behavior. The surrounded human ships didn't retreat or surrender, they attacked. Not just attacked, but threw themselves at the swarm forces with such ferocious determination that the swarm formation completely collapsed in confusion. They fought like they were trying to die, Zethkar whispered, watching ships deliberately ram into swarm vessels many times their size. No, Admiral Chen corrected, her voice filled with quiet pride. They fought like they were trying to win. Every one of those crews knew they probably wouldn't survive the engagement, but they also knew that their sacrifice would give the rest of our fleet critical tactical information and inflict maximum damage on the enemy. The recording continued, showing human ships using tactics that seemed like acts of desperation but were actually carefully coordinated strikes designed to cause maximum chaos in swarm ranks. Ships would pretend to be disabled, then explode when swarm vessels approached to investigate. Others would use their own destruction as weapons, timing their reactor overloads to take out entire swarm formations. Of those 5,000 ships, Captain Rodriguez added, only about 300 survived the engagement. But they eliminated over 15,000 swarm vessels, and provided us with enough tactical data to plan our current defensive strategy. Zethkar stared at the statistics, trying to comprehend a species that would accept such losses in exchange for tactical advantage. In coalition military doctrine, preserving personnel was always the highest priority. The idea of deliberately sacrificing entire fleets for strategic gain was almost unthinkable. Your crews volunteered for this? He asked. We didn't have to ask for volunteers, Admiral Chen replied. When the situation became clear, every ship in that formation volunteered to stay behind and buy time for the rest of the fleet. We actually had to order some crews to retreat because too many wanted to stay and fight. Dr. Harper pulled up another display showing human population centers throughout the solar system. This connects to something fundamental about human psychology, Commander. We're a tribal species with extremely strong protective instincts. When our territory or our people are threatened, individual self-preservation becomes secondary to group survival. But surely this approach has limitations, Zethkar argued. You can't sustain a war through constant sacrifice. You're absolutely right, Admiral Chen agreed. That's why we don't fight defensive wars. The moment we confirmed that the swarm represented an existential threat to our system, our entire military doctrine shifted to offensive operations. She gestured to a new display showing fleet movements beyond the outer planets. Commander, while we've been discussing tactics, our strike forces have been moving into position around the main swarm fleet elements outside our system. In approximately 6 hours, we're launching a coordinated assault designed to cripple their ability to continue their advance toward the galactic core. Zethkar felt his 3 hearts skip several beats. You're planning to attack the main swarm fleet? The forces outside this system number in the millions of ships. 7.3 million according to our latest reconnaissance, Captain Rodriguez confirmed, which is why we need your help. Admiral Chen stepped closer to the tactical display, her expression growing intense. Commander, everything we've shown you here demonstrates that the swarm can be defeated. But you're right, we can't do it alone. Our tactics work because we understand our own strengths and limitations. We need coalition forces that can adapt to human military doctrine and fight alongside us as true partners. The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The humans weren't just offering to help defend against the swarm. They were proposing to completely revolutionize coalition military strategy and take the war directly to an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. What exactly are you proposing? He asked carefully. Joint operations, Admiral Chen replied without hesitation. Human strike forces combined with coalition heavy units, coordinated through shared tactical networks. We provide the tactical innovation and fast strike capability. You provide the sustained firepower and defensive strength. Together, we might actually be able to end this war instead of just surviving it. As Zethkar considered this proposal, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The tactical display immediately shifted to show new movement in the outer system. Admiral called a human technician. Swarm reinforcements are arriving. Approximately 2 million additional vessels dropping out of hyperspace. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but Zethkar caught the slight smile that crossed her lips. Right on schedule. Commander, would you like to see human offensive doctrine in action before you make your decision? Before Zethkar could answer, the display exploded into activity as the largest space battle in galactic history began to unfold around them. The battle began not with the massive capital ship engagements that characterize coalition warfare, but with something that looked like cosmic vandalism. As swarm reinforcements poured into the outer system, human forces scattered throughout nearby space began what they called aggressive reconnaissance. Zethkar watched in fascination as tiny human ships, some no larger than shuttlecraft, darted between massive swarm bioships like insects harassing giants. They weren't trying to destroy the enemy vessels, at least not directly. Instead, they were systematically disrupting everything the swarm tried to accomplish. What exactly are they doing? Zethkar asked, studying the tactical display as hundreds of human ships seemed to dance around millions of swarm vessels. Intelligence gathering and psychological warfare, replied Dr. Harper, manipulating the display to highlight different types of human activities. Every ship out there is collecting detailed sensor data on swarm formations, communication patterns, and response protocols. But they're also doing something more important. On the screen, Zethkar could see swarm forces growing increasingly disorganized as human ships appeared and disappeared unpredictably. Large bioships would turn to engage what appeared to be threats, only to find their targets had vanished. Meanwhile, other human ships would strike at completely different locations, forcing the swarm to constantly readjust their formations. They're making the swarm nervous, Admiral Chen explained. Swarm tactics rely on overwhelming force applied in coordinated waves. When they can't predict where the next attack is coming from, their entire command structure begins to break down. Captain Rodriguez pointed to a cluster of swarm ships that were firing wildly at empty space. Look at that formation. They've been dealing with hit-and-run attacks for 6 hours now, and their crews are starting to break. They're shooting at sensor ghosts and phantom threats. Zethkar had never seen anything like it. In coalition warfare, battles were formal affairs with clear lines of engagement and predictable escalation patterns. This human approach seemed almost chaotic, but the results were undeniable. The massive swarm fleet was beginning to fragment as individual ships and formations lost cohesion with the larger force. How long can your ships maintain this level of activity? Zethkar asked, noting the incredible coordination required to keep hundreds of small ships operating in such a complex tactical environment. As long as necessary, Admiral Chen replied, then added with characteristic human understatement, though we do have a more direct phase planned for later. The more direct phase announced itself 20 minutes later when every human ship in the outer system simultaneously went silent. The sudden absence of activity was so complete that Zethkar initially thought something had gone wrong with the tactical display. Phase 2 initiation, announced the human technician monitoring communications. All strike forces report ready. What happened next redefined Zethkar's understanding of coordinated military action. The human ships that had been conducting seemingly random harassment attacks suddenly revealed themselves to be part of an intricate pattern that had been building for hours. Every movement, every attack, every apparent retreat had been designed to position swarm forces exactly where the humans wanted them. Now, Admiral Chen said quietly, and the battle transformed. Human strike forces emerged from concealment throughout the system, but not as individual ships. Instead, they operated in perfect coordination as what appeared to be a single massive organism. Ships that had been harassing the enemy's left flank suddenly coordinated with forces attacking the right flank and rear elements, creating a three-dimensional web of destruction that enveloped the entire swarm fleet. Impossible, Zethkar whispered, watching tactical displays that showed coordination between forces separated by millions of kilometers. How are you maintaining command coherence across such distances? Dr. Harper smiled and gestured to a wall display showing communication networks. We're not using traditional command structures, Commander. Human forces operate on what we call distributed intelligence principles. Every ship commander understands the overall mission objective and has the authority to make tactical decisions based on local conditions. But without centralized command, how do you maintain strategic coherence? Trust, Captain Rodriguez said simply. Every human commander out there trusts every other human commander to do their job correctly. We don't need to coordinate every action because we know our people will make the right decisions when the time comes. Zethkar tried to process this concept. Coalition military doctrine relied heavily on rigid command hierarchies and detailed operational orders. The idea of giving individual ship commanders the authority to modify strategy in real time seemed like a recipe for chaos. Yet on the tactical display, he could see the results. Human forces were adapting to swarm countermeasures faster than any centralized command system could have managed. When swarm bioships attempted to reform their lines, nearby human ships immediately recognized the threat and adjusted their attacks accordingly. When new swarm reinforcements arrived, human forces automatically redistributed themselves to maintain optimal engagement ratios. Your crews are making strategic decisions in real time, Zethkar observed, awe creeping into his voice. That's what humans do, Admiral Chen replied. We adapt. It's probably our greatest military advantage. The ability to modify our approach based on changing circumstances without waiting for orders from headquarters. The battle continued to evolve as human forces demonstrated tactical flexibility that seemed to defy military logic. Small ships would suddenly combine their firepower to overwhelm larger targets, then immediately disperse before retaliation could be organized. Formations would split apart to avoid enemy attacks, then reform in completely different configurations to exploit new opportunities. But what impressed Zethkar most was the apparent fearlessness of individual human crews. He watched ships deliberately place themselves in extremely dangerous positions to create tactical advantages for other units. Time and again, human vessels would accept significant risk to themselves in order to improve the overall battle situation. Commander, Dr. Harper said, noticing his focus on individual ship actions, would you like to listen to some of the communication traffic between our ships? I think it might help you understand what you're seeing. Zethkar nodded, and the command center's audio system began broadcasting selected transmissions from the human fleet. What he heard fundamentally changed his understanding of human nature. Strike Leader 7 to all units. I'm seeing an opportunity to collapse their left flank, but it'll require someone to distract their heavy units. Copy that, 7. This is Interceptor Group Charlie. We'll make the run. Charlie, you understand those heavy units will probably take you apart? Affirmative, 7. We'll give you 3 minutes to make your attack count. Zethkar listened to this exchange with growing amazement. The humans were calmly discussing tactical maneuvers that would almost certainly result in the destruction of entire ship formations, and the crews volunteering for these missions sounded almost casual about the prospect. Hunter Squadron to Strike Leader 7, we're in position to support Interceptor Group Charlie. If they're going in, we're going with them. Hunter Squadron, you're not assigned to this operation. Maybe not, 7, but Charlie Squadron helped us out of a tight spot yesterday. We're not leaving them to face those heavy units alone. The audio feed continued with similar exchanges as human crews volunteered for increasingly dangerous missions, apparently motivated not by orders or tactical necessity but by loyalty to their fellow warriors. Zethkar had never encountered anything like this level of unit cohesion. Do your crews always volunteer for suicide missions? He asked Admiral Chen. They're not suicide missions if they accomplish their objectives, Chen replied matter-of-factly. And yes, humans have a tendency to take extreme risks when they believe the cause is worth it. In this case, they understand that stopping the swarm here and now might prevent the extinction of multiple species throughout the galaxy. Captain Rodriguez manipulated the display to show casualty reports. We've lost about 12,000 ships in the past 4 hours, which is roughly 20% of our total force. In coalition terms, that would constitute a catastrophic defeat requiring immediate withdrawal. But you're not withdrawing, Zethkar observed. Why would we? Dr. Harper asked, sounding genuinely puzzled.
We're winning!
Zethkar looked at the tactical display again and realized she was right. Despite suffering losses that would have broken any coalition fleet, the humans were systematically dismantling a swarm force that outnumbered them by more than 40-1. The enemy formation was fragmenting, their command structure was collapsing, and their advance toward the galactic core had been completely halted. How do you define victory with such losses? Zethkar asked. Victory is achieving your strategic objective, Admiral Chen explained. Our objective is to stop the swarm from reaching the galactic core and threatening billions of innocent lives. As long as we accomplish that mission, the cost is irrelevant. But your crews... Our crews understand the stakes, Captain Rodriguez interrupted gently. Every human out there volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not come home. They're not fighting because they have to, they're fighting because they choose to. The concept was alien to Zethkar's understanding of military service. Coalition crews served out of duty, honor, or professional obligation. The idea of an entire species volunteering for military service based purely on moral conviction seemed almost impossible. "Commander," Admiral Chen said, drawing his attention back to the tactical display, "we're approaching the critical phase of the operation. In about 30 minutes, we're going to attempt something that's never been tried before in galactic warfare." The display shifted to show the main swarm fleet elements that had remained outside the solar system during the initial engagement. These forces represented the core of swarm strength, millions of their largest bioships supported by advanced command vessels that had directed the conquest of 17 star systems. "We're going to attack their command infrastructure directly," Admiral Chen explained. "Not their ships or their weapons, but their command and control systems. If we can disrupt their ability to coordinate fleet movements even temporarily, it might be possible to break their strategic cohesion permanently." Zethkar studied the tactical projections with growing horror. The plan called for human forces to penetrate directly into the heart of the swarm fleet and engage their most heavily defended command ships at point-blank range. "Admiral," he said carefully, "this plan is tactically impossible. No force could survive long enough in that environment to accomplish the mission objectives." "You're absolutely right," Admiral Chen agreed cheerfully. "By conventional tactical standards, this operation has virtually no chance of success. The crews undertaking the mission understand that survival probability is essentially zero." "Then why attempt it?" Admiral Chen turned to face him directly, and Zethkar saw something in her eyes that he had never encountered in 2 centuries of military service. It wasn't fanaticism or desperation. It was absolute certainty of purpose. Because, Commander, sometimes the most important battles are the ones you fight not because you can win, but because someone needs to fight them. And sometimes when you're willing to pay any price for victory, you discover that victory is more achievable than anyone imagined. As if summoned by her words, new alerts began flashing on the tactical display. The most audacious military operation in galactic history was about to begin, and Zethkar found himself hoping that human courage would prove stronger than impossible odds. The assault on the swarm command fleet began with 15,000 human ships accelerating towards certain death, and somehow Zethkar could hear them singing. The audio transmission was faint at first, just a background hum beneath the tactical communications flooding the command center. But as more human crews joined in, the sound grew stronger until it filled the entire station with something Zethkar had never experienced in military action: joy. "What are they doing?" he asked Admiral Chen, who was monitoring the attack force's progress with calm intensity. "It's an old human tradition," she replied, not taking her eyes from the tactical display. "When facing impossible odds, we sing. It helps maintain unit cohesion and reminds everyone why we're fighting." The song itself was unlike anything in Zethkar's experience. It wasn't a military march or a ceremonial chant, but something that spoke of home and hope and things worth dying for. As he listened, he began to understand that the humans weren't approaching this mission as a sacrifice. They were approaching it as an honor. "Assault Leader 1 to all units," came a clear voice over the communication system. "We are now entering the outer engagement zone. Remember, our job is to get the torpedo ships through to their targets. Everything else is secondary." Zethkar studied the tactical formation with professional interest. The human attack force was arranged in a complex pattern that seemed designed to confuse rather than overwhelm. Fast interceptor ships formed protective screens around larger vessels, while specialized attack craft moved in seemingly random patterns throughout the formation. "Your formation appears disorganized," he observed to Captain Rodriguez. "That's intentional," Rodriguez replied with a grin. "The swarm has spent 6 months learning to counter organized coalition attacks. They're not prepared for tactical chaos." As the human ships entered weapons range of the swarm fleet, the display erupted into a 3-dimensional maze of destruction that defied conventional military analysis. Human ships didn't attack in coordinated waves as coalition doctrine dictated. Instead, they seemed to attack individually, each ship pursuing its own tactical opportunities while somehow maintaining overall strategic coherence. "Impossible!" Zethkar whispered, watching human interceptors thread between massive swarm bioships with impossible precision. "How are your pilots navigating such complex environments?" "Instinct," Dr. Harper replied, manipulating sensor displays to show individual ship movements. Human pilots don't rely entirely on tactical computers for navigation decisions. They use what we call intuitive flying, making split-second adjustments based on spatial awareness and pattern recognition. Zethkar watched a human pilot execute a maneuver that should have been impossible according to physics, somehow threading his ship between two converging swarm attacks while simultaneously launching his own strike against a third target. "Your pilots are taking incredible risks," he observed. "They're taking calculated risks," Admiral Chen corrected. "Every one of those crews is trained for this exact scenario. They know exactly how much their ships can handle and exactly what they're trying to accomplish." The battle continued to develop in ways that challenged everything Zethkar thought he knew about military tactics. Human ships would appear to retreat, drawing swarm forces into pursuit, only to reveal that their retreat was actually setting up devastating ambush attacks by other human units. "Torpedo Squadron Alpha to Assault Leader 1. We have a clear approach to Command Target 7. Request immediate distraction support." "Copy that, Alpha. All units, this is Assault Leader 1. Priority target is Command Target 7. All available ships converge for distraction runs." Zethkar watched in amazement as dozens of human ships immediately abandoned their current engagements to support the torpedo attack. Within minutes, a coordinated assault developed around a single strategic objective, with ships from across the entire battle formation contributing to the effort. The torpedo attack itself was a masterpiece of precision flying. The human ships carrying these specialized weapons had to penetrate within a few kilometers of their target to ensure successful deployment, requiring them to fly directly through the most heavily defended area of space in the galaxy. "Those torpedo ships won't survive the approach," Zethkar said, watching swarm defensive fire intensify around the target command ship. "Probably not," Admiral Chen agreed calmly. "But they'll complete their mission." As predicted, the torpedo ships came under devastating fire as they approached their target. Zethkar watched ship after ship disappear in brilliant explosions as swarm weapons found their marks. But the remaining ships continued their approach without deviation, their crews apparently unconcerned by the destruction of their comrades. "Why don't they abort?" Zethkar asked, unable to understand how anyone could continue flying towards certain death. "Because their friends are counting on them," Captain Rodriguez replied simply. "Look at how many ships are risking themselves to give the torpedo crews their chance. Those torpedo pilots know that dozens of other crews are putting themselves in danger specifically to help them succeed. They won't abandon that sacrifice." The first torpedo ship reached deployment range and released its weapon just as swarm fire tore the vessel apart. The weapon itself was unlike anything in Coalition arsenals, a complex device that seemed to phase in and out of normal space as it approached its target. "What kind of weapon is that?" Zethkar asked, watching this strange torpedo penetrate the command ship's defensive systems without triggering any of the usual energy barriers. "Quantum disruptor," Dr. Harper explained. "It doesn't destroy the target ship. It disrupts the quantum entanglement systems that allow swarm command ships to communicate with their fleets." The effect was immediate and dramatic. As the torpedo detonated inside the swarm command vessel, ships throughout the surrounding fleet began exhibiting signs of confusion. Formations that had been moving with perfect coordination suddenly became disorganized as individual ships lost contact with their command structure. "Outstanding," Zethkar breathed, watching entire swarm formations collapse into chaos. "How many of these weapons do you have?" "Not nearly enough," Admiral Chen replied grimly. "That's why every shot has to count." The human assault force continued its impossible mission, systematically targeting swarm command ships despite suffering catastrophic losses. Zethkar found himself riveted by the tactical displays, watching individual acts of heroism that redefined his understanding of military courage. "Interceptor Wing 7 to all units. We're trapped in Grid Sector 12. Swarm forces are converging on our position. This is Strike Force Charlie Wing 7.
We're on our way. Negative, Charlie."
"You have your own mission objectives. Don't compromise the operation for us." "Wing 7, this is Charlie Leader. My people didn't join this mission to abandon our friends. We're coming." Zethkar listened to this exchange with growing amazement. Coalition military doctrine emphasized mission completion above all other considerations, including personnel rescue. The idea that an entire strike force would abandon their primary objectives to rescue trapped comrades seemed to violate every principle of effective warfare. Yet, as he watched the tactical display, he realized the humans were somehow maintaining overall mission effectiveness despite their apparent disregard for strategic priorities. Other units automatically adjusted their objectives to compensate for Strike Force Charlie's diversion, creating a flexible operational structure that seemed to reorganize itself in real time. "Your command structure is completely adaptive," he observed to Admiral Chen. "It has to be," she replied. monitoring communication traffic between different attack groups. We can't predict every situation our crews will encounter, so we train them to make good decisions independently and trust them to support each other when necessary. The rescue of Interceptor Wing 7 became a masterclass in improvised tactics. Strike Force Charlie arrived to find the trapped ship surrounded by overwhelming swarm forces, but instead of attempting a direct rescue, they implemented what appeared to be a coordinated deception operation. "All ships, this is Charlie Leader," came the transmission. "We're implementing Deception Protocol 7. Wing 7, when we give the signal, break for the following coordinates." What followed was the most audacious military maneuver Zethkar had ever witnessed. Strike Force Charlie split into multiple groups and began attacking swarm forces from different directions simultaneously, creating the impression that they were actually several different human fleets converging on the same location. The deception worked perfectly. Swarm forces, already confused by the loss of their command infrastructure, began repositioning to counter what appeared to be a major human offensive. In the resulting chaos, Interceptor Wing 7 was able to escape while Strike Force Charlie faded away in different directions, leaving the swarm shooting at empty space. "Brilliant," Zethkar said admiringly. "How did they coordinate such a complex deception so quickly?" "Experience," Captain Rodriguez replied. "Human military history is full of situations where small forces had to defeat larger enemies through tactical innovation. Our crews trained constantly in improvisation and deception tactics. The battle continued to develop as human forces demonstrated tactical flexibility that seemed almost supernatural. Each successful attack on a swarm command ship created more chaos in the enemy formation, which human forces immediately exploited through coordinated strikes that appeared to be planned months in advance but were actually being improvised in real time. "Commander," Admiral Chen said, drawing Zethkar's attention to a new development on the tactical display, "we're approaching the final phase of the operation. What you're about to see represents the culmination of human military doctrine applied to asymmetric warfare." The display shifted to show the very heart of the swarm fleet, where their primary command vessel, a bioship over 50 kilometers long, coordinated the activities of millions of other ships. It was the most heavily defended target in known space, surrounded by layers of protective vessels and defensive systems that no conventional attack could penetrate. "We're going to destroy that ship," Admiral Chen said simply. Zethkar stared at her in disbelief. "Admiral, that target is impossible. Even if your entire remaining fleet concentrated on it simultaneously, you couldn't break through those defenses." "You're absolutely right," Admiral Chen agreed, "which is why we're not going to attack it." Before Zethkar could ask what she meant, human communication traffic began indicating a major tactical shift. Ships throughout the battle zone began receiving new orders, and the pattern of their movements started changing in ways that made no immediate tactical sense. "All units, this is Admiral Chen," came a transmission to the human fleet. "Initiate Protocol Omega. Repeat, initiate Protocol Omega." All ships acknowledge. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every human ship in the battle zone responded with instant acknowledgement, and Zethkar could hear something new in their voices: anticipation. "What is Protocol Omega?" he asked. Admiral Chen smiled, and Zethkar realized he was about to witness something unprecedented in military history. "Protocol Omega," she said quietly, "is how humans end wars. Protocol Omega began with every human ship in the battle zone doing something that seemed like tactical madness. They stopped attacking and started broadcasting. Zethkar watched in confusion as human vessels throughout the combat zone ceased all offensive operations and began transmitting what appeared to be massive data streams toward the swarm fleet. The content of these transmissions made no immediate sense. They seemed to be detailed technical specifications mixed with cultural information and something that looked like mathematical proofs. "What are they transmitting?" he asked Admiral Chen, studying the communication patterns filling the tactical display. "Everything," she replied simply. "Human history, scientific knowledge, cultural achievements, philosophical concepts, artistic creations, and most importantly, detailed technical specifications for every piece of technology we've developed in the past 500 years. Zethkar stared at her in shock. "You're giving them your technology?" "We're giving them something more valuable than technology, Doctor," Harper interjected, manipulating her displays to show the composition of the data streams. "We're giving them understanding." The tactical situation was developing in ways that defied every principle of military logic. As human ships continued their massive information broadcast, swarm forces throughout the system began exhibiting unprecedented behavior. Ships that had been attacking with mindless ferocity started hesitating. Formations that had maintained perfect cohesion for months began showing signs of individual decision-making. "I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish," Zethkar admitted. watching swarm bioships that seemed to be analyzing the human transmissions rather than attacking their sources. "Commander," Admiral Chen said, pulling up a new display that showed detailed scans of swarm biology. "What do you know about the swarm's origins?" Zethkar considered the question. "Very little. They appeared from beyond the galactic rim with technology that suggests a highly advanced but completely militaristic civilization. All attempts at communication have failed. That's because everyone has been trying to communicate with them as if they were a traditional alien species," Dr. Harper explained. "But our analysis suggests something completely different. The swarm isn't an alien species. It's an artificial intelligence that has been programmed for a single purpose." The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. "You're saying the swarm is a machine intelligence?" "Not exactly a machine," Dr. Harper corrected, "but not exactly biological either. It's something in between. An artificially created consciousness that was designed specifically for conquest and resource acquisition. The problem is that its creators apparently never programmed it with the ability to recognize when its mission should end." Admiral Chen gestured toward the ongoing data transmission. "What we're doing is providing the swarm with information it was never designed to process. Concepts like art, philosophy, sacrifice for others, and, most importantly, the value of existence beyond simple survival and expansion." Zethkar studied the displays showing swarm reaction to the human broadcasts. Individual bioships were beginning to deviate from their formation patterns, apparently processing information that didn't fit their original programming. Some ships had stopped attacking entirely and seemed to be engaged in complex internal processes. "You're trying to reprogram them," he realized. "We're trying to give them a choice," Captain Rodriguez clarified. "The swarm was created to be a perfect weapon, but weapons don't have free will. We're showing them what it means to choose their own purpose." The effect was spreading throughout the swarm fleet like a wave of transformation. Ships that had operated with mechanical precision for months were beginning to exhibit individual behavior patterns. Some continued their attacks with reduced effectiveness, others ceased offensive operations entirely, and a growing number seemed to be attempting their own communications with the human fleet. "It's working," Zethkar whispered, watching millions of swarm vessels struggle with concepts their creators had never intended them to encounter. But not all swarm forces were affected equally. The primary command ship at the heart of the fleet continued to coordinate attacks with ruthless efficiency, apparently unaffected by the information barrage. Its defensive programming seemed more resistant to human attempts at communication. "The main command vessel isn't responding," Admiral Chen observed, studying sensor data from the heart of the swarm fleet. "Its programming is probably too sophisticated for our current approach." "Then how do you reach it?" Zethkar asked. "We don't," Admiral Chen replied quietly. "That's where you come in, Commander." Zethkar turned to stare at her. "What do you mean?" Admiral Chen manipulated the tactical display to show coalition ships scattered throughout the system, most of them still observing the battle rather than participating. "Commander, the swarm command vessel has been programmed to respond to certain types of threats and opportunities. Our approach works on individual ships, but the command intelligence requires something different." Dr. Harper stepped forward, her expression serious. "The command vessel was designed to process military threats from advanced technological civilizations. It knows how to counter human tactics because we're using approaches it was programmed to expect, but coalition military doctrine is fundamentally different from human doctrine." "You want us to attack the command ship?" Zethkar said, beginning to understand. "We want you to demonstrate something the swarm has never encountered," Admiral Chen clarified. "Coalition forces fighting not for conquest or survival, but in partnership with another species for shared ideals." Captain Rodriguez brought up communication displays showing human transmissions to coalition ships throughout the system. "We're proposing a joint operation, Commander. Human ships provide tactical support and information warfare capabilities, while coalition forces provide the heavy firepower and technological sophistication that the command vessel was designed to recognize and analyze." "But why would that make a difference?" Zethkar asked. "Because," Dr. Harper explained, "the swarm was programmed by a species that apparently never learned to cooperate with other intelligences. The concept of genuine interspecies alliance may be something its creators literally couldn't imagine." Zethkar considered the proposal as explosions continued to light up the tactical display. Around them, the impossible was already happening. Millions of swarm ships were abandoning their programmed objectives as they processed human information that gave them concepts their creators had never intended them to have. "What exactly are you proposing?" Admiral Chen activated a new display showing detailed battle plans. "Joint Strike Force, Commander. Human ships handle tactical coordination and electronic warfare. Coalition ships provide sustained bombardment and defensive screening. Together, We penetrate the command ship's defenses and deliver a final information package directly to its core intelligence. What kind of information package? The complete record of this battle, Dr. Harper replied. Everything that's happened here, Coalition ships choosing to fight alongside humans, not because of orders or treaties, but because it was the right thing to do. Humans sacrificing themselves for the survival of species they'd never met. Both races learning to trust each other, despite completely different military doctrines. The tactical implications were staggering. A joint human coalition attack on the Swarm command vessel would require unprecedented coordination between forces that had never operated together before. It would demand trust, flexibility, and tactical innovation from species that had completely different approaches to warfare. "Commander," Admiral Chen said quietly, "your decision here will determine not just the outcome of this battle, but the future of cooperation between our species. We're asking you to trust us with the lives of your crews, and to trust that together we can accomplish something that neither race could manage alone." Zethkar looked around the human command center, studying the faces of officers who had already accomplished the impossible several times in the past few hours. These humans had transformed a hopeless defensive action into a strategic victory through sheer determination and tactical innovation. They had found a way to communicate with an enemy that no one thought could be reasoned with. More importantly, they had shown him something he had never seen in 2 centuries of coalition military service. Warriors who fought not for glory or duty, but for the simple conviction that some things were worth any sacrifice. "What do you need from my ships?" he asked. The smile that crossed Admiral Chen's face was worth all the risk of what they were about to attempt. "Everything you've got, Commander. And trust, we need you to trust us to get this right." Zethkar activated his communication system and opened a channel to his entire fleet. "All Coalition ships, this is Commander Zethkar. We are about to undertake a joint operation with human forces. Our mission is to demonstrate to the galaxy that cooperation between species is not only possible, but necessary for the survival of all free peoples." The response from his crews was immediate and enthusiastic. Ships that had been observing the battle for hours suddenly came alive with activity as Coalition forces prepared for their first joint operation with human allies. "Human and Coalition forces will advance together," Zethkar continued, feeling something like hope for the first time in months. "We will show the Swarm Command intelligence something it was never programmed to understand, what happens when different species choose to stand together." As Coalition ships moved into formation with human vessels, Zethkar realized that whatever happened in the next hour would fundamentally change the nature of warfare throughout the galaxy. They were about to demonstrate that the greatest military force in the universe wasn't superior technology or overwhelming numbers. It was the courage to trust your allies and fight for something larger than yourself. The final assault began with Coalition heavy cruisers and human interceptors moving in perfect coordination toward the most heavily defended target in known space. And for the first time since the Swarm had appeared, Zethkar believed they were going to win. But more than that, he believed they had already discovered something more valuable than victory. They had learned what it truly meant to fight beside humans, and in doing so, they had found the courage to become something greater than they had ever imagined possible. The battle for the heart of the Swarm fleet was about to begin, and it would be fought not by humans or Coalition forces, but by allies who had learned that true bravery wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to stand together when everything else fell apart. As the combined fleet accelerated toward their final target, Zethkar heard something that filled him with wonder. Human and Coalition crews, singing together in a dozen different languages, but somehow creating a harmony that spoke of hope, courage, and the unbreakable bonds forged between those who choose to face the impossible together. In that moment, Zethkar understood that they had already won the most important victory of all. They had learned to trust each other enough to fight as one people, defending not just territory or resources, but the very idea that different species could choose to stand together against the darkness. The Swarm Command vessel loomed ahead, massive and seemingly invincible, but Zethkar was no longer afraid. He was fighting beside humans, and he had learned that sometimes the most impossible victories were won not through superior firepower, but through the simple courage to believe that together, any force in the universe could be overcome. The future of the galaxy would be decided in the next hour, but whatever happened, Zethkar knew he would face it as part of something larger than himself, an alliance forged not in desperation, but in the absolute conviction that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the odds. And in learning that truth, he had discovered the real meaning of bravery.